Thank you, everyone, for joining on day one, helping kick off TV of Tomorrow. I'm Scott Maddux. I'm co-founder of MediaSync, and have been in the second screen space a couple of years now, and been in interactive TV for close to 20 years. And that's it for my intro. We'll go to the panelists in just a minute, but a quick preamble. The title of the presentation and discussion here is Content and Rights Management and Who Owns What. And this is, it's a hot and slippery topic in a sense. We reached out to a number of legal teams at the networks and had early interest in it, and they all backed away. I take that as a good sign. Even a few independent lawyers we reached out to, they're like, ooh, I don't know enough about that to actually get up on stage and talk about it. And I think that's good. I think that puts us sort of this conversation in the right place at the right time. Let's see. We've got a great panel here representing content owners, developers, publishers, technology and platform providers. So it's really, I think, a nice cross-section. Everybody here has been fairly deep in the second screen space, which is still fairly young, but just over the past couple of years done some very, very good work here. Let me go straight to the panel and just run the line here. Introduce yourselves. Give us the very brief elevator pitch for your company, and maybe just touch on how content comes into play in your business and perhaps some of the products. And then we'll take it from there.
Good morning. I'm Calvin Carter with Bottle Rocket Apps. We're a high-end premium app development company based in Dallas. We focus on large, meaningful, consumer-facing brands. And not by design, but a very large part of our work is with broadcast customers. So we do a lot of work with Discovery Channel, A&E, a lot of NBC Universal properties, and National Geographic and many other firms. And we do this, of course, on iOS is probably 80% of our work. Android's about 20% of our work. Is representative of kind of the app appetite of those particular platforms. We're about 85 people, growing at about 2 people per week. So very fast growth and kind of on the leading edge of app development. And I would say in terms of content, that's the first question. Where's the content? When working with great brands, it's exciting, and we have great understanding of the platforms. But then where's the data? Who's going to make the data? Who's going to provide the data? Is the data structured? Is the data in a way that we can even get access to it? And then, of course, today's talk is who owns that data.
Good morning. I'm Ashwin. I'm CEO, founder of a company called Flingo. We help media companies execute strategies on smart TV platforms. We've worked with companies like CBS, Fox, Warner Brothers Television, Showtime, A&E. Most recently, we raised some capital in a Series A venture financing, and we had Mark Cuban participate in that, and so we worked with some of his media properties as well. What we've been doing over the last several years is enabling these media companies to build a branded presence on smart TV platforms. And most recently, we've developed some intellectual property that we license to TV manufacturers so that these TV apps can synchronize with linear programming using a real-time content recognition technology that we've developed in-house. It uses video signals and works in real time, and it's frame accurate, so media companies can execute interactions with their shows at specific time points.
Hi, everyone. I'm Craig Palmer. I'm the CEO of Wikia. Wikia has created a collaborative publishing platform that enables users around the world to gather together and create, edit, and assemble original bodies of work on pretty much any topic. The company was originally founded by Jimmy Wales as an extension of the collaborative work that was done in Wikipedia. And we're one of the largest internet companies probably most people haven't heard of. We're already at 60 million global monthly uniques. We've got our communities today that span, we have about 200,000 of them that span entertainment, gaming, lifestyle, sports, politics, comedy, et cetera. In the entertainment space, we have almost 75,000 communities that have created amazing content around television shows and movies, et cetera. We have over 20 million pages of content that's been created in our world. And we have amazingly passionate people who create, amazingly interesting content. And so I think we sit at a very interesting space relative to the whole second screen and interactive experience. And if I step back 1 second, prior to running Wikia, I ran a company called Gracenote that was one of the early pioneers of audio or automatic content recognition back in the early 2000s, and worked with Nielsen on creating Media Sync, one of the early second screen synchronized platforms. And one of the things we discovered, I think mutually, was that it's very hard for studios and networks to create a broad set of content for lots and lots of movies and television shows. And I think the place that Wikia sits at is in the user-generated space, for which really passionate people are creating amazing content that could be leveraged and potentially integrated with content that comes from studios and networks to create amazing second screen experiences. So that's what we do.
Good morning. My name is Zane Vella. I'm the CEO at Watchwith. Watchwith is a platform for creating and distributing related content around movies, TV shows, and commercials. The company was in business for many years as the related content database, building deep, structured data sets around movies and TV shows. So we're really excited to be a part of this panel. And today, our customers are both large programmers who use our platform, and by platform we mean a set of tools to create that related content, whether it's quizzes or polls or actor information or biographies. So by platform we mean those tools that most frequently content owners use to create that related content, and then the software, the API and software that distributors use to power experiences with that. So we're a data feed that people tap into when they're building a second screen experience.
I'm Channing Dawson. I'm the senior advisor at Scripps. We own Food Network, HGTV, Travel, DIY, Cooking, and the Great American Country Network. We're in the space because from the time we launched in '94, we have information-based networks that have a layer of content underneath the video content. Think recipes for food, think content and resources for HGTV, for the home. So we're a natural, because we produce so much for our website now that's that ties in the TV, that it's a natural to move it over to the second screen. So we're sort of right at that point where we're defining our networks now as not just the video, but also all the other content.
Great. So fantastic panel here representing a real breadth of interest and points of engagement in this space. This is, again, a potentially messy space, and there's a lot of different, when we say content, that's a pretty broad brush. Let me jump into the last part of the prologue here. I've got a few slides, very few slides. It's not a product presentation or a demo, but I just wanted to map out a very high-level taxonomy of some of the examples and types of content that we're talking about. So, again, really high level, we're obviously talking about metadata. Craig knows this space really well. Time data is the term I've used. This is what Watchwith is doing, so it's linear data associated with programming. Custom content, every show app, most of the network apps out there have custom content, really rich, deep stuff. User generated, we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a whole range of sort of social TV experiences, and I consider that content for sure. And then for the most part, we're focused a little more on second screen, but we'll touch on the first screen as well, because all of that content can push to the mobile device, can go to your smartphone, your tablet, but of course it can also be displayed on the smart TV, right? The first screen across the living room. And overlays, get interesting in what we do with that. So a few quick examples, right? Metadata, static metadata. We all know this. This is the guide data that shows up in your TV guide at home. So it's cast, crew, program description, episode guides, etc. Static. And this is, I don't think this is a very contentious area. Craig may have some more stories to share on that, and it may contradict me. But for the most part, I think rights management around this is fairly well understood. And providers like, from Gracenote to Rovi to Tribune Media Services have a business built around this type of static metadata. So this gets really interesting. Time data, right, or linear metadata. So this is a screenshot courtesy of Watchwith, and just as an example here, what they've done essentially is provided a platform and a tool chain, and others are doing this as well, but this movie Kill Bill is indexed and has metadata associated with it at the scene level. So in this case, it identifies actors or characters on screen. You can sort of see the mobile demo example to the right there. We've got Uma Thurman's Tiger Mexico trainers, which are pretty cool. So products are indexed in this way. Music that might be playing in the background is indexed in this way. The actual location of the scene or where maybe it was shot. So these are all examples of time data. So now it's not just static data set, it's things that happen over time, and that can be used to trigger really interesting experiences, from content-based experiences, social experiences, and of course branded experiences. I'm a huge believer in the power of the moment, right? I mean, what happens at the end of Act 1, Scene 12 is hugely important, right? There's no more valuable point for a product placement than when Top Chef, everybody jumps into their RAV4s and they go to Whole Foods, right? Well, that's on screen for a few seconds. That's valuable, right, to those brand advertisers. This is one of the bits of infrastructure that really enable all of us to deliver meaningful experiences in the moment. Custom content. Oh, this is a slightly outdated slide, but there's lots of great apps out there built around specific shows. So Game of Thrones in the upper right, interactive maps, right? This is a BD Live title in the lower right for Real Steel. Food Network, recipes are content, really valuable content. The X Factor app, I believe Calvin and team developed this one. It's got deep info on all the contestants. One of the screen I missed on here, 106 in Park, another app that Bottle Rocket developed, does a really interesting thing. This is a video countdown show on BET, runs daily. It's a very successful, very rich engagement between what they do on screen and then what happens on that mobile device. And there's a lot of content associated with that. So user-generated content. So we'll definitely go a little bit deeper on this. So HBO can generate cool custom content up to a point, but some real issues pop up. Return on investment, it's expensive. They don't have the resources to do that, to maintain that throughout, a big show, yes. Across a full network, really challenging. So user-generated content, I think, comes into play as a great potential solution. And Craig will talk a little more to this, but this is I just took a look at this last night, and it's incredibly deep, from characters and actors. It tells you which actors were considered for certain roles and then dumped, and who's alive, who's dead. It goes far, far beyond what you'd find in the HBO app. So there's some really interesting content being generated here. And then lastly, social, or no, not lastly, the penultimate slide here. We obviously have people tweeting about things. I just threw this one up left. It's a tweet about a product. It's just somebody saying the new A7 is awesome. So that's content, right? How will Audi use that in their promotions? The lower center here, I don't know if you caught the New York Times article about Facebook using likes. This poor bastard, Nick Burgess, he liked this product. It was last Valentine's Day. He liked, as a joke, on Valentine's Day, a 55-gallon drum of personal lubricant on Amazon, right? Hilarious, funny joke. Well, now Amazon has a deal with Facebook, and any of the products that are purchasable on Amazon, and you happen to like it, now may get promoted to your friends. So all of Nick's friends now see this as an ad, essentially. This is great, right? Interesting, challenging. Oh, here's the BET example in the middle. This is a screenshot from 106 in Park, and they do a beautiful job just elevating sort of the social experience. Check-ins, right? Get Glue check-ins, that's a form of content. Polls and quizzes, these are all sources to be considered. And the rights management issues are completely undefined, very gray area, very slippery. I love this example. It popped up about a year ago. It was Howard Stern. I don't believe he did this in concert with, I think it was on HBO. His movie Private Parts aired, and he started live tweeting. And he live tweeted the entire movie, about, probably about 2 hours, hour and a half. And there were a couple of hundred tweets. So this is a really interesting example. So here is a director's commentary, sort of through a back channel, Twitter, but very high value. If I watch Private Parts, I'll probably go back, next year, year after that. I saw it years ago, but when I go back and watch it, I want this. I want to see what Howard has to say in that moment. So there's value there. Now, does Twitter allow for that? Do they license that? How's that managed? Those are really interesting issues. And just one more, sort of as part of the preamble here, first screen overlays, right? We do talk a lot about second screen, but again, all of this content has a role to play potentially on the first screen. And there are, issues here. Carriage issues, right? Who owns that experience? The CE manufacturer is in a position to do a lot in this area of overlays. Ashwin and Flingo, enable a lot of this with automatic content recognition. But then, what do you do with it? You could play ads, and this is true first screen, second screen, right? What about that Pepsi ad that plays over the Coke ad on the primary screen? So this starts to describe some of the various types of content that we're going to be talking about. So that's it for the preamble. I want to jump in, Channing. I'm going to ask you actually to lead off here and talk about, as a content owner, what are the issues? When Scripps goes to acquire a program, what do you negotiate?
Okay, so
what are the rates
we're
you're
one of
concerned
the
about?
few networks that tries to own as much of the content as we possibly can. We started from 95, 94 with the idea that if we could own it, we could replay it in VOD. VOD was a glimmer in somebody's eye at the time. So from the beginning, still to this day, we own about 89% of the content that runs on our networks, not including Great American Country. And when we buy the rights, we try to buy all media, all rights, all media in perpetuity across all universes with an S. Right? It's gotten that absurd.
Good luck with that.
That has not necessarily, that's to our video production companies that want to air content on our networks. That's not necessarily the same standard that we use for content across the web or across mobile, but it's close to it. So we try to buy all rights. When you can't buy all rights, you run into things like chefs who own their own recipes. And the recipes are interesting because up till the modern digital age, chefs made a lot of money on cookbooks. And the cookbook content actually sat as their content. We couldn't own it, but they gave us the right to promote it, use it on our websites to promote their shows. So as long as we passed that hurdle, we could use the recipes, and still do to this day, use the recipes. But there are people who say no. And in fact, if the chef falls off the network, the recipes go with them because they no longer have a show to promote. So there's some real distinctions there that are problematic. There are problems with they're custom cases. When Anthony Bourdain at the Travel Channel tweets like he did one of his shows, and our ratings go up because of his tweet feed, who owns those tweets? Does he own those tweets? The courts have not decided. We've not gone to court about that. But it's in that gray area that is so interesting in this space.
What would you do with that? Would you at this early stage where sort of these lines are pretty blurred, would you take it and say, hey, we're going to leverage Anthony's tweet stream. Let's do it.
Yes, and it's usually along the lines of, does it promote him? And in promoting him, does it promote his books and promote his persona? So to a certain degree, it's still in the gray area. There's no rights absolutely defined. If you try to define that, then the William Morris Agency gets involved and other agencies get involved. And so it becomes very complicated very quickly. But you go at it, and you hope that you can maintain it on a higher level of sort of, we're both in this together. But eventually it's going to come down to some court cases eventually.
Great. Calvin, let me throw in to you. You Bottle Rocket develops top-tier apps, and you work with a lot of clients. So you've got a real breadth in your sort of exposure and view of this world. Tell us a little bit about how the networks and your clients, content owners, come to you. What kind of problems are they asking you to solve in terms of curating or auto-generating or presenting custom content?
So in terms of, speaking of, let's just say the broadcast work that we do, there's usually three types of apps out there in second screen. So there'd be the show app. That would be, let's say, the X Factor work that we did, or Big Bang Theory that Turner did, that sort of thing. There could be a network app. let's say HBO Go, or it could be an alt TV app. And the alt TV space is probably, in my opinion, the most likely to move towards UGC and auto-curated type of content. And the further down you go from alt TV to network to show, what we feel is that brands are more interested and networks are more interested in a much more, I'd say, premium content type of experience for their users. The problem is they're not staffed for it. The traditional production process and timelines and whatnot aren't rigged for this type of thing. You go to a producer who's already strapped for resources, producing some show, and then you ask them to produce an entire additional channel of content that may or may not be used at the end of the shooting cycle and whatnot. So it's a real challenge, and there's really a pretty distinct incompatibility between the way TV shows are produced and then the content needs and the content desires and wants of the users. Bottle Rocket's very focused on the user. We've got many stakeholders we serve. Obviously, our clients are a very important stakeholder in that. But at the end of the day, everyone's happy and everyone's needs are aligned if the user is happy. And so Bottle Rocket has to maintain that focus on, that laser focus on what does the user want, or the viewer in this case, we call them users. And the users want more of what they already know they love. That's like the most simple way to put it. Users already love the content, the brand, the energy, the passion, whatever emotional payoff they get from the content. They want just more of that. And so then it's our job to figure out how to produce that. And the users are actually pretty damn good content producers themselves, frankly. We believe and we have the faith in the user. So we're a big believer in UGC. Probably the most ubiquitous version of that would just be social, the social component. But I think a lot of broadcasters rely a little bit too much on social. Social's cool, but it's table stakes now. How do you elevate that? So I would say that was one of the biggest challenge we help broadcasters with is how do we do something that isn't something a user looks at and says, I could get all this on any old Twitter application. What's really going to connect them to the brand? And another challenge is it kind of depends on the show. Not every type of show, it's not a one-size-fits-all, if you would. So sports would obviously be different from talk, which would be different from reality, which would be different from deep drama. So the work we're doing with Showtime is dramatically different than the work that we're doing, that we did with X Factor. And just the experience and the type of content, you can rely, in my opinion, you can rely a lot more in UGC for things like reality television. Voting shows and whatnot. That's what a lot of the work that we do with BET is a lot of UGC content. And the more you move towards deep, linear drama, you really don't want to get into that UGC constant distraction. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but there's lots of significant issues, and it really gets down to what does this show or this content mean to the user, and then customizing it for that.
It was a good segue, and I think Craig and Zane, you probably have some experience here as well. In this UGC space, right, how do the networks feel about that, right? They spend a lot of time honing their programming and their brand, and now here's sort of, crazy-ass over-the-top users, those kooky users, putting together all kinds of stuff. But it helps solve a potential problem, right? Does this give them some breadth and depth without all the expense of doing it themselves?
Yeah, let me answer your question by explaining just a little bit more about the kind of content that gets created in our world. Because, as I said earlier, we're in the collaborative space. So people work in our world to create a really deep, rich body of work on the topics they love. So as an example, our Harry Potter community has 11,000 pages of content that they've created, more than all the books combined. Our Marvel database that covers everything Marvel Comics, 97,000 pages of content the community has created. Our Batman community that's getting jazzed up and energized about the new Batman movie has over 5,000 pages of content. And Warner Brothers actually has chosen to release the game that's coming out in parallel with the movie to our community first. They're not actually releasing it to professional editors. They're letting our community be the first to experience it and write about it because they're the most passionate people about the Batman series that actually exists. Yeah, and actually that's in our world it's a little bit different world than kind of the individual expression world of Twitter and Facebook, et cetera. You know, you don't live in our world creating 96,000 pages of Marvel, content if you don't love it, and if you spend that much time doing it, you want your house to be clean and well lit. So if you see bad behavior, the community is hyper-focused on weeding it out. And what ends up being a really, shining example of great content that actually when brands or studios or networks start looking at it, they love what they see in it because it represents passionate, influential users who are actually, as measured by ComScore, where there was a study that was done about who are the first people that want to experience a new movie, read a book, listen to albums, and our community is at the top of the list of the people that are first to experience and heavy influencers, in the social web around, things that are coming out. So we have a really unique clientele that creates amazing content. I'll just give you one story. Lost was one of my favorite shows, and we had a rabid Lost community, and they were hyper-focused around figuring out the latest conspiracy theory, and they actually figured out that whenever somebody said the word Canada, they were lying about whatever else they said. And the screenwriters actually didn't intend this, but the screenwriters followed the wiki, and they actually picked up that idea and built it into future shows that they were still writing. And so that kind of exhibits the power of what can happen in the user-generated content world. And I think Wikia really represents what I'd call the vanguard of the post-editorial world, where the kind of content that's being created by the community is as rich, trusted, deeper, more dynamic than can be created kind of in the professional editorial world when you have millions of people who love something working to create amazing things. A lot, there's heavily focused kind of in the under 35, but if you kind of under 20 and 20 to 35 and 35 and over, probably one third, a little more heavily skewed toward male than female, but still across, really any individual community could skew differently based on the topic. Our Glee community is heavy female, and they experience the show by not only writing about it, but live chatting while the show's going on. We could have 1,000 people chatting about the show while the show's actually going on in kind of a teenage girl kind of fashion. And so it really depends on what happens within our 200,000 communities. But I think the user-generated content world, especially in our space, can be hugely complementary to what studios and networks and brands are trying to achieve.
Hey, Zane, in your experience, let's talk a little bit about distribution, right? I mean, you work with a lot of networks and content owners. How are they thinking about leveraging UGC, social, custom content, and then how are they thinking about distribution, right? What goes where and how to manage that? I think Watchwith is in an interesting place there with regards to that issue.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it a little bit in terms of what Craig was just describing. So content owners, I think, are, we hear this very often, have a real challenge to accomplish or to connect with so many different distribution channels with very small teams and very small budgets. We forget that, right? Like you sit back and you think like, wow, Bravo, they must have just all the resources they need, right? It's Bravo or any network. But when you really look at the pressures that programmers are under, their world is exploding, right? So they have their traditional view of their MVPD customers that they have to service. And in the past, it was quite straightforward. They would, the shows were licensed and they would provide some supplemental marketing materials that would help drive the audiences to their shows. And now the number of MVPDs and the competition and what the MVPDs are doing is growing and changing. And then you also have all the mobile apps, right? There's all these amazing mobile apps that are getting tons of attention, whether it's Shazam or new startup things. And those same teams of people have to find some way that their content is represented there. And then there's the over-the-top providers. Game consoles and CE devices are now connected to the internet, and they want to do the shows as well. And it's overwhelming. And then there's the web channel. So these very small teams still have to now accommodate, like, how do they actually control their message? How do they get the official related content, right? How do they get assets that are approved, these high-value assets, into those channels? And I think in the same way that they often provide some core material to the Wikia community, right? Because they look at it and they say, wow, Wikia is a place where we want to, you know, drop the mother load, right? Like put a great kit in their hands to see what happens. The exact same thing is starting to now happen in what we call the second screen business. And it's a bit of an awkward phrase, but our business value or the service that we provide to content owners is metadata syndication. So we're actually, in terms of content owners, they are using our leading tools, right? In a lot of ways, what we do is we have great tools to quickly and efficiently create that content. But that's not the business. The business is providing that metadata to all of those different distribution partners in a way that can help fuel those experiences. Now, the really important piece is that that's not where it ends, right? That related content that comes from the content owner, from the network themselves, none of them even think that that's the end game. Now, maybe they will create their own direct-to-consumer experiences, and a shop like Bottle Rocket, you know, is the go-to for that, to create an amazing Bravo Now experience. But Bravo still wants to provide that content to companies like, you know, an LG or a Samsung in a way that when the television has ACR in it, when the television now knows what's on, those content owners want to be able to control the experience that comes up for the viewer, you know, in conjunction with companies like Flingo. And I think that's why this panel is really interesting, because all of these things are intertwined, right? It is definitely about experience, right? What will a consumer be excited about in the end? But we also have to remember, like, all of the complex processes and resource challenges along the way to get there. It's exciting.
Yeah, you teed up a perfect segue to Ashwin, and maybe you can talk a little bit to the first screen, right? Spent a lot of time on mobile here. Let's talk to the first screen and ACR, right? And what it means to enable these devices or these content owners to deliver synced experiences. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think you know, as we've heard, kind of from the position of the networks, when there was a world where there was very tight linkages in the value chain, you know, from the production all the way through the endpoint. Metadata was in many cases bundled with the content, the delivery mechanism. A lot of control existed, but now we live in a world where the endpoints are connected, over-the-top experiences are available, and you know, the media companies have been, in their relationships with distribution, have made the cost of content very expensive for companies that are trying to use over-the-top delivery platforms to compete with traditional delivery, but the companion experience is still wide open. So we've seen companion experiences using ACR in smartphones, tablets, and the beginning of a new generation of devices in television is going to change this landscape pretty quickly. The process for these devices to synchronize doesn't require technically any specific content or buy-in from the networks. So the traditional stick, you know, of being able to say we own and we control isn't going to work. And so I think we all have to think about, you know, what are the carrots that bring the connected device into the value chain, you know, that basically allow them to be a source of profit and value to the whole business rather than something that sits outside the value chain. So we put some enabling technology inside televisions that will, on a sort of frame-by-frame basis, allow the app platform to identify what's on screen, whether it's being delivered by cable or satellite or game console or over the air. Doesn't really matter. It's sort of using an algorithm to identify this content, and it could be time shifted as well.
And are there, and this for the whole panel here, any legal issues that you're aware of with regards to, you know, in a sense, this over-the-top recognition of what's going on the big screen and then delivering some companion experience? There's lots of different types of ACR, and maybe there are some issues associated with different technologies, but in general, is it fair game for these app developers and publishers to throw something out there that runs on top of somebody else's stream?
Yeah, there's things that technology can enable you to do, and there's things that are just good business and good practice. So just because the technology allows you to do something doesn't mean it's a good idea. It could be something that gets you in court. It could be something that pisses off consumers. And so what we're finding, we're working pretty closely with the networks on this, is to, first of all, make sure that the ACR technology doesn't do anything specific to copyright violation. Making sure that that process in and of itself isn't in putting the technology platform at risk. Second thing is that we work pretty closely with the networks to make sure that the experience isn't confusing. So that if there's an app that is synchronized and pops up on a smart TV platform, that it can't be confused with the network itself if it's not created by the network. But we think that the consumer and the viewer is going to be most pleased when the networks and the platform work together.
Sure.
So that if it's sort of very synchronized and very dovetailed using the metadata that's being created by, for example, the Watchwith tools, it's allowing the network to really manage and control that experience and use this platform to make the content more engaging. And for the first time, make over-the-top a lot less threatening to the core business, because now we can sort of fulfill the dream of keeping people on these networks longer and making the content more engaging with all the great content that's out there.
Channing.
There's about a 50-year legal legal standard, I guess, about signal bandwidth, about the relationship of content owners to the MVPDs, about what they can put on the signal that we occupy as we go out. So they can put on closed captioning, for instance, and they can put on weather updates and alerts and certain things that we all are familiar with. So if, in fact, we allow the user-generated content or this new app world to generate content that sits on top of our screens, it creates, there's already a legal framework to take that on. And I don't know of any current legal fights yet, but you can imagine that if somebody starts doing pop-up videos over Food Network, somebody's not going to be happy, right? So we're going to have to deal with that in a real way. And the precedent that has been set, or the standard has been set in these 50 years of carriage agreements, will be what we fall back on.
Colin.
Nor am I.
But one thing I would say is that don't assume that additional content, that additional activity is going to actually be through that broadcast signal.
Oh, it won't?
It's so then it becomes, like, for example, an app that we produce could be controlled by the content owner or not controlled by the content owner. At the end of the day, the user wants what they want. They will go to the best place to get what they want. So we believe it should be the broadcaster. The people who own that content should be celebrating that content and producing the absolute best second screen experiences possible. If they don't, then someone will for them. And then it becomes a problem. In a perfect world, obviously because we work with broadcasters, we would like them to be the gold standard of the best user experience on connected TVs, mobile devices, tablets, whatever comes next out of the innovation of Apple and other players in this market. But it won't necessarily be over the signal. It's going to be from someplace else, and then becomes, well, gosh, okay, so does that contract or that precedence apply? Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it may or may not. And then hopefully the question is we don't have to deal with it because the broadcasters are producing great user experiences.
Yeah, I think you made
No
a
doubt.
comment earlier that the courts will ultimately decide on a lot of these things, and when there's enough money involved, then there will be litigation, and these things will get sorted out. I will say, having been, having run Gracenote prior to Wikia and been involved in kind of the early days of audio fingerprinting, back along with a handful of companies like Audible Magic and Shazam that were doing audio fingerprinting around music first. That happened before being applied to more television and broadcast. We spent a lot of time with the RAAA, discussing fingerprinting and because the music industry is looking at fingerprinting and saying, is it a derivative work and do we own it basically if it is a derivative work? And the assessment at that time was, you really can't reverse engineer a music track out of a fingerprint. So it's not technically at all a derivative work. So really, there's no say that the music industry had on the fingerprints themselves. And I think the same thing applies kind of around these second screen, kind of synchronization capability in movies and television. So I don't think copyright law or will win in this world. What will be the complexity is what are the agreements that companies have, both at the user level, if you use things, or between companies that govern what you can and can't do. I don't think it'll be determined by copyright law in some of these areas. It'll be determined by contract law, more likely. And at the end of the day, it will be litigated in court on a lot of these kind of things when there's enough money at stake.
I think, yes, it's definitely going to be, as the dollar volume increases, so will the cease and desist letters. And I think, I'm not sure who said earlier, it's like, but ultimately the viewers, the audience will decide, right? Like what experiences work. I think Channing actually just said, yeah, gosh, it's a new day. Like we're sitting here, and there is that recognition. I think that's actually what's exciting about it, is to recognize it as a new day. I think it makes sense, though, to position this in the context of the workflows. It's a little bit wonky, but to really put it in the position of the workflows and the distribution business, which is actually what drives the money. And a lot of what we've done comes out of practical real-world experience, where if we were prototyping a cool set-top box experience on behalf of the service provider, oftentimes, hundreds of thousands of dollars would be spent. You make this great interactive experience. Everyone loves it. And then legal affairs says, like, sorry, like, we don't think we have the rights to actually put that interactive experience up on screen. Even though we think the audience would love it, even though we know creative people at the networks that supplied the graphics for it, right? It was more just a question of the explicit rights to do so don't exist. And in the absence of the explicit rights, legal shuts it down. And so what this really ends up being is about the formalization of these processes through the contracts over the next couple years, right? It's unfortunately, this innovation will happen in 6-year windows, right? Where, okay, now you've licensed my programming, and I'm going to include a feed to this related content, which you have the rights to now use in your second screen application or in your first screen application. And in a way, the creative kind of producers and creatives are, pulling the sled forward. Like all those great things that you showed up there are really about getting the content owner. So if there's anyone in the room who can help influence that ecosystem, if you're on the programming side, like push with your business teams to actually say, hey, we've got something else we can sell, right? We actually have valuable related content that you can use in your negotiation, right? We can help you get better terms or more dollars because, hell, we're already making this stuff just as a natural part of the process. And if you're on the service provider side, demand that when you license a program, demand that you're also getting some amount of official related content that comes along with it. Because the folks in this room actually, since we're more in the trenches, we can really accelerate that more so.
So there's a lot of wild experimentation at this stage, right? We're seeing what's I think most exciting about this space is a lot of it is consumer oriented, right? So killer user experiences popping up. Yes, content driven, social driven, but the money is going to change the game, right? When the big money starts to hit, and I think there are 2 buckets here to think about. The big bucket is, of course, advertising, right? Here's $170 billion worldwide television ad spend, and it stops at the glass of the television, right? So when that reaches across the living room and hits the consumer, hits that mobile device, and you can close the sale right there, or make the next step from home to retail, that's a huge game changer. And things are going to get sorted out right quick when some of that money really, and that ecosystem starts to function at a high level. I think there's another smaller bucket here, which is commerce. So it's Watchwith eBay is a good example today, right? Here's a sync solution. I think it's manual today. They're looking at ACRs, but you can say, oh, I'm watching this show. I'm watching Star Wars Episode 4 for the 20th time with the kids. Well, please, guys, distract me. Tell me what else. Oh, it's Christmas, or I got a birthday coming up. What can I buy? So does the content owner have a piece, do they have rights to a piece of that action or not? So again, there's 2 buckets here. I'm just going to throw this out. We got a few minutes left. talk about commerce and/or advertising and what you
I'll
think.
hand over the mic really fast since I answered the last question, but there's one funny story about Watch with eBay. I don't see any of our friends from eBay in the room. We've worked closely with eBay over the last couple years on that feature, this idea of Watch with eBay. And the whole idea was synchronized experience that would leverage data from the content owners to actually drive a better experience. Well, it's early days, and of course, eBay launched the product without that close coordination, and they're now kind of working on a unilateral basis with content owners. But the funny thing is, you go to it and you open up the show, Watch with eBay, and you're just like, oh, cool, Fringe, right? That's one of my favorite shows. And you click Fringe, and all the products are like leather fringe dresses.
Right.
It's like,
And you look so good, you just had to have it. I want that fringe miniskirt.
Exactly. Or my favorite show, New Girl, right? Without the official, right? Without some official product information actually coming from the content owners, using the keywords on the particular episode yielded, pretty sad results. So it's just another example of where there is money to be made for both parties there, but it definitely takes some cooperation.
Can you imagine what 50 Grades of Shade, or 50 Shades of Grey? Whips and chains.
Yes.
But let's not consider the content owners the only players in this game, because everybody's a content owner now. Everybody's a content producer. So I think everything. Think about all the agencies that are dealing with this world and not having precedent for it. It's a pretty interesting space because everybody's a producer.
Quick anecdote. And when I was at Yahoo, this was probably like 9 years ago, I walked into the office one day, and Yahoo, some people may not know this, but was a seed investor in Google. And we were getting financials every quarter from Google because it was still private at the time. And I remember the day when my boss was sort of scratching his head and said, oh shit, Google's EBITDA is greater than Yahoo's. It was still private, and Yahoo is obviously a public company. And something was sort of very clear at that point, that Google had turned a brand advertising business, which was the web at the time, Yahoo dominated it, into a direct response business. And when it did that, it attracted a whole new set of dollars into the medium, and a whole new business model, set of advertising. And so it made that business a whole lot better. And as I think about the 170 billion in TV ads, I would start to apply a filter or lens that we've already got from the web, which is how does all these new platforms, whether it's an ACR-enabled phone, tablet, TV, whatever, allow this brand ad business to turn into a direct response ad business? And how do we take the 170 billion and not take anything away from it, but contribute a whole new set of dollars on all these screens that people have? And it's the networks to lose, right? You are already selling all these dollars. Being able to synchronize with your ads and putting that carrot out there for all these platforms is really an interesting business model tweak. And I actually think that it doesn't take, not only does it not take anything away from the 170 billion, it actually makes your airtime more valuable.
Absolutely.
So it can actually grow the core base as well.
And I'd say just one thing, if you don't like what's in the water, just go further upstream. And the great thing about content is essentially you will get to the top of that stream, and it is you, the content owners. And you can put in the water what you want to be downstream. So I think I'm kind of reiterating what you mentioned, which was the broadcasters and the owners of content should take advantage of the fact that they sit at the top of that stream. If they are the ones producing great user experiences, if they are the ones producing great tagging and marking so that e-commerce makes sense, so that interactive television makes sense, so couponing makes sense, they have that ability to put what they want in the water. The problem we see and Bottle Rocket sees is that there's a lot of wait and see and a lot of concern over who owns what, and a lot of concern over over-the-top players, but not a lot of spending of energy on producing those great user experiences themselves. And that's where I think most of the energy should be.
It's a new set of skills, by the way. Producers, it takes some learning.
We're going to have to, sorry, Craig, quick, and
Yeah, I
then
was
we're
just
going to
going to
start
add
to wrap up.
one comment just beyond the ecosystem that has to build out relative to the advertising side. But I think another twist to it, as this whole ecosystem builds out, that's going to give the ability for a brand to really have a deep engagement with a small set of targeted users in a very custom way. And what we're finding in our world is that the people who view our community as just somebody to talk at with advertising aren't very successful. But if you actually view the community as a group of people to find unique ways to engage in a dialogue, that is above and beyond just core advertising, that's where you get the biggest response and the biggest interaction from the community. And I think as this platform builds out, the ways in which brands can figure out how to engage almost one-on-one with the best fans and consumers is going to be a critical angle to the ones that will be most distinguished, and most successful, and kind of in the TV of the future.
Let me do a very quick run of panel, short answer here. When do you think we'll start to see this ecosystem, particularly with advertising dollars, start to take hold, right? When do we hit that tipping point where it really starts to make sense? Is that 6, 12, 18 months away?
We're in the beginning of it right now. It's
Yeah.
not. It's very much in the weeds, and
Yep.
it's popping up and things. Britain's Got Talent did an app that had 12.5 million viewers vote for the talent on their screen in real time. Right?
Wow.
So it's already crossed over, and the
Yep.
next show to get it is
Big
X Factor,
numbers.
and advertising goes right along with that. So it's
Yeah.
there. It's just now we're going to have some phenomenal things going on in the big shows, in the live shows,
Yeah.
that'll drive it.
I think it was actually CES this year.
Really?
I really do. After being in this for 6 years of
Yeah.
in the trenches, it was really like it felt like this year something popped, and I think it really was the technology curve for automatic content recognition devices. So that televisions now could on the floor they were showing or in private booths, private suites, televisions that could recognize the content blew people's minds. I think also then seeing phones and tablets and realizing that the processor footprint and the network connectivity was already there, so now that you could recognize something. And I think what it did is it woke people up that ACR equals some kind of potential disconnection from my asset.
Right.
Right? And so I need to do something about it. And I think that's really been the trigger.
Great.
I think we've gotten to the starting line, and that's good.
Yeah.
But I think it always takes a lot longer, and there's a lot more inertia than most people think there is. I mean, if you look back to the days in which we had the first digital music track to the point in which digital sales actually surpassed physical sales, it was a decade, 12
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So, when is it going to get to the point in which advertising in this space, outweighs kind of traditional advertising approaches? It's going to be a decade or more to get there, but I do feel like we've gotten to the starting line now, and there'll be a tremendous amount of innovation that'll be occurring over the next number of years.
All right. Ashwin, Calvin, bring it on home.
Just really quickly, I think it happened this season at the upfronts where a number of ad sales folks that we try to empower with insights and data basically have told us that we need to have some of the same tools that the web guys have. The technology-driven ad sale has really cool tools for measurement, ROI, and the TV ad sales folks want those tools. And so these devices, even if they don't present a base of 30% or 30 million homes in the United States, even with a far smaller number, it can generate a lot of interesting data sets that start to make the TV ad sale look a lot more like the web ad sale in terms of ROI calculation.
So you're lucky, Scott, because I did bring my crystal ball today. You're very
Awesome.
lucky.
Fantastic.
So as I look into my crystal ball, the things that I see are, number one, I'm not totally on board with the idea that a traditional television set will be the second screen, if you would. A 3D TV didn't get people to go out and throw away their HD TVs and buy new ones. Apps don't seem to be doing that either. But that doesn't mean that the experience is not going to be there. I think it's going to take something a little bit more transformational and out of the club, if you would, that would be a tool set that users would really like. I'd like to see Apple open up the Apple TV to third-party developers like us and to broadcasters like you.
Yeah.
The Apple TV does run iOS, the same operating system on both iPhone and iPad, so we have all the tool sets ready to go right now. That's a very important part. I do agree that advertisers will go when users are there, and it's happening. I think we're 1 year into a 3-year total transformation of the way users think of the word television and what television means to them. And I think broadcasters have phenomenal opportunities, and they shouldn't be scared of conversations like, what if there's not a television set in the room? Is there still TV? Of course there's still TV, because there's still great content and a great passion and desire for that content. And that is where we feel that content owners should focus on, the intense desire of users to get to that content, and then be cool with the way the users want to get that content and get on board and take advantage of the greatest asset they have.
Great. Thanks. Well, I'm getting the high sign here, so we are wrapping up. Thank you all for joining the panel. Please, a big round of applause for our panelists. Thanks again. Enjoy the show.